Hey, this is Michelle. Are you ready to make some big decisions? School is about to begin, and if you're anything like the parents I know, you're probably freaking out about the decision you've got to make. That's why this bonus episode is for you. Since this is such a major decision of stress lately, I've invited Stephanie Ashby to come on the podcast and talk to us all about it. Stephanie is a homeschool expert. She's a mother of 5 and the owner of STEAM Thinkers, a business that offers an integrated science program for homeschool curriculums. And they have an 8-week done-for-you STEAM program where you get the supplies and we'll do the rest. She's been homeschooling her own children for the past few years, and she's here to answer all of our burning questions like, should I keep my kids home or send them to school? What are the options? How do I know that my kids are getting all that they need in this learning environment? And where do I even start? Plus, I was shocked to learn that homeschooling might be an easier and more time-saving option than doing virtual learning through the school, especially if you have more than one child. So let's dive into this interview with Stephanie. I hope you got to get as much out of it as I did, and then it helps you take the stress off of this big decision that you're making right now. Welcome to the I Cut the Mustard show, where a plant-based diet and small, simple moves make healthy change happen, and where we believe that you already have what it takes to slice through any barrier that stands in your way. Shing! You're sharp enough. You cut the mustard.
Okay, I'm going to start this out by saying that when I was a kid, I wasn't homeschool. I never planned on homeschooling. I'm not a homeschool for lifer kind of person, right? And even when I had my kids, I would see other people homeschooling and I would say, man, I'm not organized for that. I don't think I ever want to do that. It wasn't something that I was planning on doing. And so this is from the perspective of somebody who kind of went kicking and screaming into it, if that helps you. So it's from that perspective and not the I've loved homeschool for the all of existence kind of perspective. When we started homeschool, one of my daughters is in first grade and she was struggling with reading and she doesn't like to sit, which is not great for a public school environment. So whenever her report cards would come home, she would feel bad. She felt like she was dumb because she wasn't doing as well in the subjects as they were. And so she was muddling by. She's, middle of the road. She's making it, but I really wanted her to succeed. And we already worked with homeschool families. We work from home, so we're at home. So there wasn't a reason that we couldn't bring her home. And then when I got her home and actually worked with her one-on-one, I said, oh, my child, I think you're dyslexic. Of course you're having problems reading because they're not addressing that for you at public school. So really it was the best thing we could have done to bring her home because I wasn't working with her one-on-one like that, like they do at the school. And so we could really see what she was struggling with and address that specifically.
Wow, that's so great. I mean, you should be really proud of yourself for just noticing that in her and then bringing her home so that she could get that special attention. That was awesome. So, tell us a little bit more about what were your original expectations going into homeschool, and were there any obstacles that you faced at the beginning of your journey?
Well, it was one of the big obstacles is to get out of the schooling mindset. Like you have to take what public school looks like and bring it home. And that's really kind of how I started. And I had to change my whole way of thinking about it, that I didn't have to do it that way. My husband was like, I don't know, because he's really big on math and science. He's like, I feel good about that, but I don't know if I can do the English stuff. He doesn't feel like he's really strong in that area. And I was like, oh, no, it's fine. I totally have the English stuff down. Then I said, oh, you're dyslexic. I know nothing. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So luckily, in this age of the magical internet, there are lots of resources online to help you with those things. So I didn't have to know how to teach her when she was dyslexic. I didn't have to have some kind of a certification because there were things to help me, which was amazing because I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, the internet is definitely a magical place. So you mentioned feeling like you had to follow the school format. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? What does that mean, and what was that shift like for you?
Well, when you think about homeschooling, you feel like you have to come home. If you bring them home, that you need to like have breakfast in the morning and then do these hours of instruction with some breaks and then have lunch and then teach hours of instructions, like till 3 o'clock, the school schedule, right? And that's not what you have to do because um, at home, you're working with them one-on-one. And at school, they do a lot of times with a lot of their time is spent switching between classes and getting things in and out and cleaning them up and learning how to be little human beings. So that's not direct instruction time. And so when you come home and you're teaching them, you don't have to teach them for hours and hours like that because you're at home. And so it's a different environment and a different schedule. I mean, it's great to have a homeschool schedule. Like we're always going to teach, we're going to do our homeschool stuff in the morning, or some parents work. And I know that their schedule is that they do all their schoolwork stuff like after dinner, which wouldn't work for my family. That doesn't sound great, but it worked for other people. And so you just have to like totally throw out whatever you think about what school needs to be, school in quotes, and do what, find what works for you.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you shared that story because, yeah, it's nice to know that even if you're working, you can still make homeschool or virtual school work for you.
Yeah. And I know that's what a lot of people are worried about right now during the COVID stuff is they're working or they have a business, but they're worried about sending kids back to school. And so that's one of their big concerns is if they can do it around whatever other things they have going on right now with their schedule.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the coronavirus since this is what we made this whole podcast for. Have you noticed more people wanting to do homeschool lately? And if so, yeah, what are their biggest concerns right now?
Oh man, I have seen I can't even give you a percentage, but so many more homeschool people. It is amazing. Like I've seen local friends who are planning on homeschooling this year who were like me who'd never planned on homeschooling ever, right? And there's some business groups online, a lot of business ladies who are, trying to figure out how to do homeschool while they're running their small businesses. Companies that are selling curriculums like physical copy books and stuff are like sold out. So luckily, they're working hard to get all that stuff printed and have it to you, but they're like on back order. And we have some local, like I live in Oregon, so they're virtual programs for Oregon, online kind of schools, and they're full. They can't take any more kids. Before homeschool was kind of, we're like the weirdos. The regular people are jumping into it. And so everybody has questions. And I've seen a ton of questions that are like, I have kids this age and what curriculum do I use and where do I start? And I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's a huge deal for people who feel like they've kind of had this whole thing dumped on them and we're already so busy. And how can we just do this one more thing? Especially kind of like you were saying, especially if I'm going and kicking and screaming. And now you're here to specifically to talk about homeschooling because that's your thing. But I know for most of us who we still have several different options about what we can do with our children this coming school year. So can you describe what some of those major options are for us?
Well, there's face-to-face schools, which of course that looks different for different school districts. Some are only going a few days a week or have shorter times, or wear masks, don't wear masks. And so that's there's a lot of things going on with that. They have virtual school here. Our cases are high enough that the states say we can't start back in person even, so that's not even an option at the moment. So it will be all virtual school, which for people who are worried about that and still want to like do it, it's going to obviously look way different in the fall because that was like emergency. And now teachers are set up for that. So it's honestly is going to be better than it was in the fall. But it's still, a lot of parents don't like that format because it is similar to what we've talked about, where it's young kids that are going to be on the computer, and it's still like seems like hours, and so that is just not doable. But it's an option for people who like school, especially older kids do better with the virtual school as opposed to like little kids. There's online charter type schools. So they're private schools who've been doing the online thing for a long time. And so those are going to look more like virtual schools, but they've been doing that format longer, obviously, and are set up for that. And so that might look a little different and fit a little better for your family. I know in Oregon, they have an online virtual school that's free. It's like a online public school, but it's been online this whole time. There's so many schooling options. And then, of course, homeschool. And for this, still, it's not going to look like what it was in the fall, because some people didn't do the virtual school. They just brought their kids home and taught them at home for homeschool for the fall. But that was all emergency schooling, right? You weren't, and one of the problems with that is with homeschool, you want to you might want to take extra classes or go do these trips or be with other kids, and you weren't doing that because everybody was locked down. And so even if you tried homeschool in the fall, it wasn't really like homeschool could look like, just because of all the restrictions from COVID and things like that.
Okay, let me pause you there and let's do a quick recap. So, option number 1 is in-person schools that will look different wherever you're at. And then number 2, you've got virtual schools, which again is looking different wherever you are. And here they kind of gave us the option, do you want to do virtual school or do you want to do in-person schools? And then we've got private charter schools, which I didn't even know existed. So that's good information, but those might be filling up. So I guess if you're listening to this, hurry and try to grab a spot if that's what you want. And then number 4 is homeschool, which also has its different tiers of its own. Am I right? And I want to go into a little bit of what those tiers are. But before we go into that a little bit more, could you dispel some of those stereotypes or fears that most of us have when we think about homeschool? You mentioned earlier that maybe you're kind of the weirdos. Those are weird people who do homeschooling, or, whenever we were growing up, we always thought of the homeschoolers as like antisocial, or they don't have any social skills. Where do they get out and get those? So there's a lot of different things that maybe we're thinking or having stereotypes about homeschooling in general.
Okay, I have a few of those. And the first one I want to address is that somehow homeschoolers are like anti-schooling, like in a general sense, which isn't true. Like people say, oh, well, they're just going to pull their kids out and then bring them home and not teach them anything. Or they're like these really religious types that they're only going to talk about their religion and stuff related to it. And so the kids aren't going to get practical learning that they need for life. But that's really just not true. All the homeschool moms I know are very concerned about what their kids are learning, and they want to give them a good experience and a wide variety of things that they're learning. I mean, of course, for anything where it's stereotyped, you are going to find people that fall into those groups, and that's very sad if you pull your kids out of school and just like have them at home doing nothing. But mostly people do not fall into that. There's a lot of reasons that people do homeschool. Unfortunately, a lot of people I know have pulled their kids out because there's been bullying at school that the teachers or the schools aren't able to or willing to address. And so they don't want their kids in that environment, so they bring them home. Or they have health problems where they're regularly missing school, so it's easier to just do homeschool at home than to try to have them make up things. Or especially special needs kids, if they feel like the schools aren't addressing those things, they just bring them home. So there's a lot of reasons that people homeschool, and it's not because they're against learning in general. The second one that we've touched on a little bit is socializing, that there's this huge misconception that homeschoolers are like totally antisocial, socially awkward. And that's the question you get. Oh, if you're homeschooling, how are you socializing your kids? Where are you socializing? Because of course, at school, it's great that they go and they're in a group of kids their age and they get to interact with other kids, but that's not the only place in the world you can interact with other kids. And so that's really a big misconception, because one of my favorite things with homeschool here is we have homeschool co-ops, which is just a group of moms that get together and we split the kids into classes. So we'll split the kids up into different ages and the moms take turns teaching and they get to play. We organize play dates like at the park in the summer, and we organize field trips to different local places, and we have moms nights out, which are great. So you're socializing too. And so they have lots of local events. Also, if you're not in school following the school like vacation schedule, you can like hop in the car and go visit your family more often because you don't have to wait for a school break to do it. And so that really just builds socialization. Honestly, like here, we're a small town, like 20,000 people, and we have more events than I could ever take my kids to. So if you're in a bigger area than that, you probably have a lot of stuff going on that you could put in for socializing that you probably don't even know is there. But there's like so many opportunities, you won't even be able to schedule them all.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad there's so many options out there. So, stepping back for just a minute, how, I know a lot of people, I would be concerned going into homeschooling that my kids are going to get enough schooling. Like, how do I know that I'm teaching them all of the right things? And I think for me, I'd want to step back and say, hey, what's the point of homeschooling? And how do I make sure that my kids are getting what they need to succeed? Can you speak a little bit more on that?
Well, and that one of the misconceptions too is that you do homeschool, but that doesn't lead you into college, which it totally can. There's many colleges who like to see homeschool kids because they're lots of times doing outside activities and are well-rounded. And if you have a transcript, they like to see that. And so they can get into school. So one of the things that I really think is important is for you to sit down, if you're going to be homeschooling and thinking about it, to sit down and really like set out some goals for your schooling, right? Like, what are we trying to get out of this? Do you have some specific subjects that you want them to be really strong in? Maybe they're like totally obsessed with dinosaurs. That's what my son is. And they already know they want to be a paleontologist. And so you can say, okay, well, we for sure want to focus on these areas because that's what they want to do. And if you really want to, you can like look up a list of skills by grade and see kind of where your kids are falling. But I don't love to do that because it makes me stressed out. Because I think it's more important to master the skills than to fill out that school checkbox. Because everybody has one of those subjects where they're like, I passed it in school, but I can't tell you a thing about it and I didn't learn anything, right? And so it's really nice with homeschool that you can take those subjects and really, like, if they're struggling with math, you can make sure they understand basic math. And then, okay, maybe in high school, we didn't get to calculus, but are they really going to need calculus? Even when you go to public school, everybody has gaps in their education of things that they didn't learn. And that's going to happen in homeschool too, but you can feel confident that it happens everywhere. So you don't have to be quite as worried about it.
Okay, that does sound flexible in a lot of ways. Okay, so let's say, so I sit down and I kind of decide what I want for my kids. Are they going to go to college? What do they need to know in the future? And I think this is a great opportunity for filling in some of those gaps that we don't have in education that we're noticing right now. Like, I was just interviewing someone on another podcast a couple weeks ago, and she said, man, I really wish I had home ec. I wish that class was still taught because I don't know how to prepare food. And a lot of times I hear, you don't know how to do your laundry or whatever. People are feeling unprepared for school in a lot of ways. And you, as a business owner, maybe your kids are really interested in what you're doing. So then, you can kind of teach them practical skills about finance or growing a business or do little projects like that. So that's really neat. But okay, I just wanted to ask you one more question to clarify, because if I'm thinking, still hovering between sending my kids to virtual school or keeping them home and just doing homeschool, what are the pros and cons to each of those? Like, are there more considerations that I should have before I decide which one to do?
One of the benefits of homeschool is that you can choose things that are hands-on or more interesting for your kids, whereas with virtual school, the teachers are choosing the things and it's a one-size-fits-all because they have to choose it for their whole class. So maybe those are not the things that your kid wants to do. I know I have a friend when they were doing virtual school at the end of this last school year, and she was like, we're sitting at the computer till like 8 o'clock at night because he's like, does 5 minutes and wander. And I'm going to do 5 more minutes. And she's like, it is awful. Virtual school is the worst thing ever. And so obviously virtual school is not fitting you well. And you maybe should consider something else at that point, because that is like torture for you and for the kid and for everybody.
Yeah, that's a great story. I mean, I think you've given us a lot of good insight and options. And of course, it's going to be different for every family. But if I do want to dive into homeschool, if I decide that's for me, which obviously for now, I personally have just sent my kids to school for as long as they want to go there and as long as I feel like it's safe. For the coronavirus, I'm kind of like, go live your life, enjoy as much as you can before they lock us down. So I've sent my kids to school for now, but maybe later if I want to dive into homeschool, I'm totally lost. I have no idea where to start. Is there some kind of done for you program that I can just kind of grab and throw it in there that's similar to virtual school, or would that be the same thing? Do I have to just make it all up myself? Are we talking, you mentioned money, but are we talking thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars? Can you just give us some of the major options, the major homeschool options?
Okay, so options wise are something we've talked about before, which is like a virtual school. So this would be they're like enrolled in this program and it's done for you. And I haven't ever done those personally, but I feel like it looks more like virtual school where they have these subjects and they may or may not have live classes where they have to be there at a certain time. It may be one that's more flexible, like they have the videos you can watch when you want. A second choice is like a done for you physical curriculum. So it's not online, but there's lots of curriculum companies that sell, they might just have English and language arts, but they might have everything. So you can buy everything from the same company and it will be a full curriculum done for you that you follow through with. That can be expensive because we all know, like, books. If you went to college and bought textbooks, you know that education books are just expensive. Luckily, there's like a high resale value on those, and I know a lot of people who choose that, who pick the curriculum and have it sent to them and are so excited to open the box and have it all from the same company. So you can do that. I am much more of the third option, which is the piece it together option, which means that it's more flexible and I choose what I want for each subject area. The kids all use the same online program for math, but my daughter who's dyslexic, we do a special online program for her reading that only she does. And for history, I kind of put that together myself, and we'll all pick the next topic we want to learn about, and we all learn it together as a group. So all 5 of my kids, who are from age 5 to age 13, we're all going to learn the same topic in history. And so that makes it nice that you can teach multiple ages at once, which is sometimes you can't get with when you're ordering the curriculum. You have to order like a different set for each age.
Okay, wait a second. So you got kids ages 5 to 13 and they're all doing like the same thing? This is totally blowing my mind because, like, with virtual learning, it seems Like you're keeping track of different history and everybody's doing different math, and maybe it's looking like this big chart that you've got going. But if I keep them home at homeschool, then I can kind of stick them all together and they're doing the same or similar things. Is that right?
That's one of the benefits of homeschool that you don't get with virtual school and public school. They have everybody split up by ages, which is nice. Kids get to interact with kids their own age. But it's also great to learn to work with people that are not your own age. and really lots of the subjects the kids can learn together. Like for history, we always do all together. And so we'll watch something on PBS. Oh, I love PBS. PBS has so many amazing free things, by the way, homeschool things. They're great. And so maybe we'll watch a show about whatever on PBS. We've been doing ancient civilizations. So maybe we're learning about Egypt right now. And so then the little kids can like build a pyramid out of sugar cubes. And the older kids are doing a research project on Egyptian gods. So we've all learned about Egypt in general, and then we've kind of split up a few activities that are age appropriate. So it's not super hard to do, and a lot of the learning is the same, but we've just tailored it a little to their age.
That's awesome. I think honestly, if we do come home, if they tell us that we have to come home, I think maybe I'll just opt for the homeschool because I mean, whenever I only have 2 kids that are school age now and then a preschooler, but just having 2 different schools last year and having to keep track of like, what's this school doing and what's this schooling, that was really confusing for me. And I think just having one thing that everybody's doing, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, we have a friend here who they have 10 kids, which is a lot to deal with school-wise, right? And they're a huge age range. And so when we went to virtual school, she showed a picture of this schedule that she had made. It was like down to the half hour every day of this person has this electronic device at this time. And this person has this electronic device at this other time to like work everybody in to the times they needed to see the teachers for live classes. And then she did it for like 1 week and she's like, that was awful. So our new rule is find a device and get your schoolwork done before dinner and try to eat lunch.
That's so wild. I mean, I'm just imagining all the hours of effort she must have put in and like the color coding of the chart. That just sounds so crazy to me.
So honestly, okay, most of us don't have 10 kids, so we're not going to be dealing with that, but it's definitely juggling. And so when you think, oh, like for me, I have 5 kids at homeschool, like how do you fit in teaching all of that? It really isn't as difficult as it sounds just because you can combine so many things. Or you're like taking a trip to the museum, so everybody's going to the museum. We're all learning things.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I mean, I'm all about efficiency, and my husband's actually always teasing me because whenever I look at other people's stuff too, I'm like, man, they should have done it this way, or if they did it that way, it would have taken them less time, and it's just not efficient enough. So he's always kind of teasing me about that. But yeah, so for options, let's just go back. I wanted to make like a quick review, just get a big picture idea. So for the options, it sounds like number 1, we've got the virtual done for you stuff that's similar to the virtual school that we maybe have an option from our schooling. And then number 2 is maybe a physical program that you can get from one company or multiple companies where it's done for you and they give you all the books. Then we've got the piece it together option that seems like the most flexible option, but it's also the most intimidating. I mean, it sounds like a lot of work up front trying to figure out which piece to put everywhere, and that maybe the task of doing that might be overwhelming for people. But I'm not sure. But you have a program that you've created in your business. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and where does it fall among all of these different options?
So our options all fall under the piecing it together. So we have one program that's hands-on science, which is units for science curriculum. So the parents sign up, and then we have science videos in there that the kids can watch. And then you can do the activities with your kids, which we also include guiding questions. So we really try to make it so you don't have to have a science degree or hardly know anything about science, because I know science is one of those intimidating subjects. It's intimidating for many people, but you don't even have to know how to do science.
Excellent, excellent. So it's the science portion of my Piece It Together program. So what age ranges does that cover? Is it like 5 to 13, for example?
Ours focuses on elementary. We'd like to expand out in the future, but that's what we have right now so far. And we focus, and what makes us a little different, I know there's so many curriculum options, but if you're looking for something that teaches hands-on science stuff and not just a textbook, and we focus on teaching the science, really digging into the processes of how science works, as opposed to memorizing science facts and scientific literacy. With all this stuff going on right now, since we're talking about COVID, there's a lot of science in the news and people don't know how to interpret it and don't know, they have to have somebody else tell them what the science is saying because they don't know how to do it themselves. And so we focus a lot on understanding the science and being able to have that scientific literacy of understanding science in the world around them in everyday living, because it's important. People don't think they use science, but you do.
Yeah, I really like that. That's so good. I mean, before we moved, my daughter was in a STEAM school, and I really liked that. I liked that it was more hands-on learning and they were doing things in projects, because I feel like in a lot of our schools, that's one thing that we're not as good at in public school is learning how to learn. I mean, I know coming back from college as well, I had learned a language. I had gone to Japan and learned a language, and I came back and I tried to learn Spanish, and I just noticed how everybody was so scared to speak Spanish because they didn't want to make a mistake. They didn't want to get a bad grade on the test. But in the real world, we've got to go out there and make tons of mistakes, and it's all projects, right? Our life is about projects. So I just really love that. But so for example, if I go into homeschool and I get your science program, do I have to get the English and the math as well? Or how do I get started here? Can you help me out?
So right now we have the science program. So we're adding into our units some suggestions about how you can build it out into a bigger curriculum. Like we have a unit that talks all about animal adaptations, and we have this lesson called Build a Monster. And so you build your own monster that has these different adaptations, right? And we talk about, what kind of pros and cons that has for your monster's survival. We're getting into some survival experiences. And so I was thinking about it, and my kids have this show on PBS, because we love PBS, called Monstrum. And it's a lady who deals in the history of monsters and culturally why these groups have made these monsters. Like, what significance does it have for them culturally? And so I was like, oh man, those two would go so great together, because here we are building a monster, and now we're going to go over here to PBS and talk about history stuff, like why, where did this monster story even come from, and why? And now we're going to talk about sociology stuff of why would we even make up a monster that looks like this? Like, what benefit does that have to their society? Put together some resources to say, okay, if you're doing this unit on animal adaptations, here's some stuff to add out to it to do math. And we already suggest picture books to go with things, but even to give you a little more, because a lot of homeschoolers will do unit studies, which is we're picking this one topic and now we're gonna do everything on that topic. We're gonna write about it, we're gonna read about it, we're gonna learn the history about it, we're gonna do some math related to it. And so they really just focus on that one at a time. So with the hands-on science units, we'll give you a little direction to help you if you want to do that unit study to kind of move beyond science.
Yeah, something like that sounds really great, because I don't want to have to go out and buy 10 programs and try to smash them together. And it's just going to look like that lady's chart that she had for her 10 kids.
Yeah. Well, and then of course, if we give you some suggestions, maybe you say, oh, this writing part isn't working for me, so we're going to do something else.
Yeah, okay, so that sounds good. So I can use the science program by itself and then grab English and math and history and stick those together, or do what you said and use the science kind of as my base, and I'm just going to do units, like especially if my kids just absolutely love science and that's their thing. So then I could use that science as the base and I can make projects around it based on your suggestions. So how would I use those units? Is it like once a month? Does it last the whole year?
We have 13 units, and we have a suggested kind of schedule about doing one or two a month. I think we have suggested 2 a month. But if you're really digging into it, maybe you're going to only do 1 a month. So we do have just a suggestion, and then you can go from there. All of them have science videos, and then we have a few activities and lessons to go with it, and each of them have a STEAM project, which is, of course, we're trying to bring all that science into the real world. Again, flexible. So we give you the suggestions, and then you can do what fits for you. And maybe your kid is, we have a science, or not a science, all of it's science. We have a space is the word I was looking for. A space unit. So if your kids are like so into space, you can do space forever. I mean, there's so many things you could do with it. And so maybe you're going to spend more time on that one. And there's maybe there's a subject they already know a ton about. And so you're going to, just do a couple activities in there.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. So before we move on to more tips and getting started helps, what you have another program, right? That's like more of a done for you one though. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So this one's more of a class. Like the hands-on science is the parents sign in and you can access it for however many kids you have, and use it all year. But the other program we have is the Brain Builders STEAM Club, is just like a shorter term class. It's 8 weeks. There's 2 activities a week, 2 STEAM activities, and they're all hands-on projects. We teach a piece of the project, and then they go out and like finish it up. We focus on problem solving skills. So the idea is that we teach them a small piece, and when they finish it, they're all making a bridge or a whatever, but they're all going to look different because they're using their own creativity and different methods to solve the same problem and get this, sort of similar end result, but they should all look different because we're using our minds. So we give you a supply list, and then we take over teach them the piece, how to do it. And then the kids each have an account where they can ask us questions or talk to the other kids in the group, and submit like what they're doing, show us your things that worked really great, and show us your splatted egg failures. We want to see all the stuff.
Yeah, that sounds fun. So 8 weeks, but then maybe I could spread that out a little bit because 2 projects a week sounds like a lot.
Yes, you can. Okay, so it's set up to be 8 weeks with 2 projects a week, but you pay for it and you get lifetime access. So you can definitely spread it out because it does sound, I mean, if you have a busy schedule, 2 projects a week sounds a lot. So you can spread it out.
Okay, great. I'm glad that there's a little flexibility and options there. So I want to move on and talk a little bit about social interaction in general. And we talked earlier in the episode about how that's kind of a stereotype anyway for homeschooling, that we're not getting enough social interaction. And then now with quarantine and the reality of wearing masks and doing extra distance between people, we're not getting the same interactions that we used to get. So, yeah, what are your brilliant ideas to stay socially connected when we are being so distant? And how can our children grow up like normal people?
Well, social interaction wise, of course, we have like Zoom and virtual things. So homeschool wise, I don't know that our co-op was talked about it, but if you find a co-op of parents locally that are maybe doing some weekly or whatever Zoom chats where the kids can get on and talk to each other, have some chat time, say what they're doing. Hopefully you can find something like that. Another thing right now, if you're not on lockdown, outside is, from the science that I have read, as talk about science.
Yeah, you probably
All the science stuff says that outdoors is lower risk. And so you can hopefully get together with friends and stuff outside at the park, and they're like, running around for a little while. Things like that fall into that low risk category. Because then the kids have the opportunity to be together. And with our program, we let the kids each have a account where they can comment and share. It's all moderated. I know parents are really worried about letting their kids talk to other kids online because they really feel like it's not safe. So we moderate all the comments before they're ever shown and things like that. But there's really opportunities like that for kids to see other people. With things open right now, you could go to museums and such like that and like talk to whoever's there about, I don't know, they always have the guides or whatever. So you can, kids interact with people everywhere. So, if you're following precautions and going there, there's not going to be a lot of people there right now, probably. So you can kind of let them go to those different places, get different people's point of views, and have somebody else telling them something that's not you.
Yeah.
That's always nice to be like, I'm not the teacher today.
Okay, yes, those are some great ideas. I really love those. So let's say that I've decided to do homeschool. I've heard this great stuff that you just told me, and I feel totally convinced that I can do it right now. And I even have some ideas for what curriculum I want to do, and I've decided and I built out a schedule. But what are some of the other things that we need to consider or do before we jump into homeschooling? And I know that you sent me some resources that I'm going to put in the show notes, but some resources about laws in each state for homeschool. And is there anything else that I need to know?
So the first thing you need to do is find out the homeschooling rules for your state. Because here in the United, and even like internationally, different countries have different rules. So here in the United States, each state has their own rules for homeschooling. And so I sent you a site. They have a map that you can click on and get the basic homeschool rules for your state. So there are some states that have like no rules. Like you don't even have to tell them you're homeschooling. You just pull your kids out of school. And then there are others. I think our state is considered a moderate rules, which I thought it was pretty flexible, but apparently we're just moderate. And so for us in Oregon, you take the kids out of school, and then we have local education service districts. And so you have to say, you don't even have to give them a lot of information. You just have to say, these are the kids' names and we're homeschooling them. And they'll send you a paper, an official paper that says that you're homeschooling, so that you can present that if there's any questions about kids skipping school or whatever. You're like, oh, they homeschool. Here's my paper, whatever. We don't have to keep track of hours or days taught. We don't have to even keep track of what we're teaching here in Oregon. They have mandated testing for 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade. And if the kids fall below the 15th percentile, which is like average of the people who took the test, if you're like low score, 15th percentile is pretty low bar. If it's lower than that, they'll say, oh, there might be a problem here. And they like monitor kind of what you're doing for like the next year or so until they test again to make sure that they're learning the things that they need to learn. Then outside of that, there are some states that are like highly moderate what's going on. Those are mostly in the Northeast, it looked like from the map. Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts, maybe. That they require some even extra stuff, like they have specific subjects they require, or some kind of like teaching something for the parents. But those are like really restrictive, and there's a handful of states, maybe 5. But most states are really good about homeschooling, and so you need to start there and see what you even need to do for homeschooling. Like if you need to register with somebody, then that needs to be done before school starts. If you are in a state that doesn't really have any regulations, you just say, hey, school, we're not coming, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, see ya. Bye. We're going to jam at home now. So the first thing that we're going to do is to find those rules for the state. And then I'm going to put that link in the show notes. And then our next step would it be those goals that we talked about earlier?
Yes. The second thing I would do is before you ever ask anybody for curriculum suggestions, because there are so many, you really need to say, what are the goals for my kids? Because there are definitely some like Christian-based curriculums, and people like those. But if you don't want those, then you can say right off, please don't suggest these to me because I don't want them. So you really do have to set out the goals to what you want for your homeschools. And if you want a program like our hands-on science, if you want a program that's going to be more hands-on and not a textbook, then it's easier to get suggestions when you already know that. You're like, don't suggest textbooks to me. I'm looking for this. And then you won't be overwhelmed with, there's a lot of curriculum choices, and that's what I think is the most overwhelming, is because there are so many choices. And so then you won't be overwhelmed with everybody giving you all of the choices because you already kind of know what slice you're looking for.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it kind of sounds like while you're talking about this, I was thinking about you're sort of a go to the mountains person or a go to the beach person, and or maybe you're both, but depending on which vacation you're going on, you're going to want totally different suggestions. So maybe pre-framing it for people and saying, hey, we want to have a program that's all done for you. I don't want to have to do anything. So what can you suggest? Or I want to piece it together. I've got this and this. I'm looking for this and that. So I think that's really good advice. So then I can just go on Google, or I can go on these forums and find some good suggestions about the curriculum that I want and sort of piece it together. Or if I've totally fallen in love with the one that you already talked about, then I could just hit the button and buy it. And that sounds super easy.
Yeah. And there's lots of really great reviews where parents, like if you are a huge fan of YouTube, there's lots of YouTube reviews where they will take the curriculum and kind of show you what's inside, tell you their experiences with it. So that's nice. And lots of the curriculums also have where you can download like a free chapter and try it out. Or I know there's one curriculum I can think of specifically has some of their language arts for like 1st through 3rd grade are free, and then you pay for ones for the older grades. So then you can like download those ones and try them out and see if you like it and want to continue on with them. But do not be afraid to throw out your curriculum. Like one of the things I think that stresses people out with homeschool so much is it's like the decision that you're making for the rest of your life, right? Like if you don't like homeschool, some people try it and honestly hate it. Then you can send your kids back to school like in the middle of the year or next year. It's reversible. And if you have spent some time and researched this curriculum and thought it was the best, and then you hate it, don't keep going with it just because you put time in researching it. Like throw it out and try something else. I know I had a writing curriculum that I was really excited about, but the books are just kind of confusing, and so I don't use them. And I'm like, dang, but I'm just not doing it because I'm like, this doesn't work for me, so I'm not.
Awesome. Yeah, I really love that. Sometimes I know I'm like, oh no, I don't want to waste it, all that money that I spent, but then I'm just wasting my time on something that I don't really like to do. and you can always just try it, and you can go back or you can change as you go. And my husband and I are just the opposite personalities sometimes. And whenever I make a decision, I'm like, let's find a dentist. So then let's just pick one and move on. Like, this one looks good. And he's like, no, we've got to decide. We've got to ask everybody. We've got to do all the research, or it's going to be the bad choice. But I think it's not going to be perfect either way. So just pick something and just go with it. And then, again, you can always change later. But awesome. Okay. I've got a random question for you now. What is your favorite animated TV character?
Okay, this is popping into my head because we watched it recently, is Avatar: The Last Airbender. My kids have been rewatching the series like second time through because it's back on Netflix. And and I love the characters on there, but my favorite is probably Sokka, who's like, he doesn't have any, like, the whole premise of the show is like they have these special powers where they can control water or fire or whatever, but he's like the silly older brother, so he doesn't have any powers and he's always making stupid jokes. But he's still like there when you need him and gets stuff done, and the whole show is funny. But if I have to pick my favorite, I guess he's my favorite. But
Well, thanks for playing with me there. I know I like to ask a little bit about your personality, and it's nice to see who you're attracted to, that there's the guy with no special powers. So I think it's just really fitting for our homeschool realm that, you just don't need special powers to make this work.
Yeah. And one thing I want to mention that we haven't talked about is, I guess I don't know if I would call it a separate homeschool model, as like a hybrid option, because people are worried that if they do homeschool, their kids can't do things like sports or band or choir, or they'll miss out on those group elective kind of activities. And you, even though you are homeschooling, still pay taxes for public school. And so the schools really need to work with you on doing that. And so you do have the option of putting your kids in to do those things. Like some schools have, like, if they want to do school sports, they have to do testing every year instead of every few years, but it's definitely doable. My daughter last year was doing art and band. Luckily, they were both next to each other in the morning. So she would ride the bus to school, do her 2 classes, and I would pick her up, and then we would do homeschool. So her core subjects were homeschool, but she had that opportunity to do electives. So the biggest thing I want to get out of this homeschool thing is to just throw out what you thought you knew. And there are so many school options these days, and there's no reason that kids can't succeed and learn about the things that they love and have a good time because there's so many options you can do to really enjoy it and do the things you love.
Okay, yeah, great. So we don't have to have superpowers. We've got lots of these options that we can choose from. Yeah, and I'm actually feeling pretty empowered after our conversation here today. I feel like I know how to create a plan if I need one. Like, I've already decided, but if anything changes, or for those of us who haven't decided yet exactly what to do with our kids, I feel like I know how to make that plan. I could look back and I think of the goals that I have and the time that I have available, and then I can go through and take those actions about finding, the rules in my state and doing all the things that you have suggested today. So that's really awesome. So before you go today, I wanted to ask you, though, to leave us with some top tips that you have. Is there anything that you've learned from your homeschool experience that you feel like would be valuable for everyone else that you can pass on to us?
Okay, I have 3 practical tips for you that I will share. One is my whiteboard tip, and this is what I do with all of my kids. I did it with just the 2 when they were homeschooling. Then when everybody came home in the fall because school was closed, we did it with everybody. So I have a whiteboard. I put their names at the top, and then underneath I write a list of everything I want them to do for the day school-wise. And then I say, go, and they go. And they know that once they've checked that all off, they can go do whatever they want. So some of those are things that I need to help them with. And so I'll let them know like what time I have available to help them. Like, if you need help with me, I have this time in the morning and we need to do those things. But a lot of things, I mean, I work from home. So a lot of those things that I put on the list are things that they can do themselves or help each other with. That is a great learning tool. Help your brother. And so, 30 minutes reading time for the kids who already know how to read, they just go and check it off. And that is my favorite thing. So at the end of the day, they've marked off, what stuff they've needed to get done. We like reassess at lunchtime. Are you getting the stuff done that you're supposed to? Are you going to be all day doing this because it needs to be done?
Yeah, that's awesome. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you in your tips, but you had sent me this chart that I'm thinking of as you're talking about this that we haven't brought up in our conversation yet, but it kind of goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of the episode where we have this expectation that we bring our kids home and it has to be like an all-day thing that we're spending hours and hours instructing our kids. But the chart that you sent me is showing that the actual book learning time, the learning time is actually quite minimal. So for preschoolers, it says 20 minutes. For kindergartners, it's only like 30 to 90 minutes, and that's pretty average throughout the elementary school age, like no more than really 90 minutes or 2 hours a day that you're doing actual book learning time. So with this chart that you have, this whiteboard, it makes sense that you can just write those things on the board. It's not going to take you all day long if you sit down and actually do it. You actually have a lot of time, and then you can take breaks in between and kind of split it up. So it doesn't sound so overwhelming anymore. That's awesome.
Usually, like if they are diligent, I mean, the chart thing kind of gives them some leeway. Like I can do one thing and then go play for a little while and then come back and do something else. But if they like work on it consistently and take just little breaks, we're done by lunch for sure. This chart actually that I gave you that you're going to put in the show notes, I've seen some by homeschool parents, but to make you feel really good, this is from the Illinois State Board of Education. So you can feel like this is like from the schools and an educator approved. They put this out during COVID when people were doing virtual schools, because I think that people felt like they had to be on the computer all day. So for kindergarten, I have a kindergartner this year. So active instruction time is like 30 minutes a day, minimum 30 minutes a day, maximum 90 minutes a day. So that's totally doable because as we mentioned, at school, they're not learning the whole time. Another thing I like about this chart is that it encourages teachers, which we can just take it as the parents, to have these optional projects that they give them. So even though they're only getting, you only have to do this minimal teaching time, and then everything else they're doing totally counts. I mean, we learn every day through all the things we're doing. So they suggest like puzzles and independent reading and building with blocks and taking a walk and dancing and writing a letter to somebody. We don't have to build those at school, but they're still learning and using those school skills. And so that's amazing. So you don't have to feel like you have to be there all day, like tied to their chair, teaching them for hours and hours. My second tip is board games. Since we talk about how everything counts, I love board games because kids like to play games. And so I'll say, okay, play your game. This is part of school today. So we have Upwards that we brought. So it's like Scrabble, but you stack it up if you don't know what it is. So it really helps with their thinking about words and about spelling. And they say, oh, this word says rope, and I can make it say Rome or whatever, because you can stack the letters on top of each other. The word games like that are sometimes hard for my daughter who's dyslexic because she's an awful speller. Spelling is just so hard for her. But that way, she's playing it with the other kids and she can be like, how do you spell this? Do I have the letters to spell this? And the other kids can be like, you don't spell it like that. But there's so many games like that. And even you can repurpose games and this game has dice and now we're going to use the dice to do this other whatever else. So we have lots of games and I love playing games. And then the third thing I think everybody needs to do is establish a minimum viable homeschool day, which means you say, okay, for me to consider this a successful homeschool day, these are the things we need to do. And I don't want you to make it a big list, like math and reading. If we do math and reading, we're going to consider it a good homeschool day, right?
Oh, so good. Thank you so much for coming on here. So the whiteboard tips that, they can kind of do it themselves with a little bit of your direction, the games to make it fun, and then the minimal viable day just to keep yourself sane and take some of the pressure off so that your expectations aren't like crazy out there, but you can do this. So yeah, thanks. This has all been really, really helpful. I know I've got a lot out of it. I feel like I'm, again, empowered so that if something happens and I need to switch plans from what we're currently doing, then I've got the tools to do it. And I'm going to put your science program and the STEAM program that you have down, and links to those down in the show notes, as well as all the resources and tools that you gave us today, which are all really great. So yeah, just thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, I'm excited that I came. I just want really people to really understand that school doesn't have to be just this. It's not just this set path that you have to follow in just this same way. We have so many options, and people have been teaching their kids forever. I mean, before public school came around, people taught their kids all kind of things, and you can do it too.
Yoo-hoo! Thanks for jamming with me. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and click subscribe before you leave, and I'll see you next time for another great episode of the I Cut the Mustard Show.